Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Beyond Reach podcast. I'm your interim host, Jay, and I'll be introducing Taylor, who preached for us.
Oh, hey Jay.
What's up, dude? How you doing?
Doing good. What about you?
Good. I'm hanging in there. So Taylor is our regular host, but because she preached, I'll be taking it in for this week. And my first question for you starts with, your first words of your sermon. You said that goldfish have the attention span of 9 seconds, while humans have the attention span of only 8 seconds. How has this stat changed the way that you try to pay attention to things?
Yeah, so I got this stat from John Mark Comer's book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which is where like a lot of the basis of my sermon came from. And I just read that and I was like, there's no shot. Like I thought it was a joke. I was like, that is a lie. So then I Googled it and they were like, it's true. And I was like, what is happening? Like what is going wrong with us? And so yeah, I think I like have always kind of thought about it of we're kind of like afraid to have our brains not be stimulated. Like I don't know if you struggle with that, but it's like we live in a day and age where it's so easily accessible to us to constantly have that like going on. And so when I like finally realized like that my attention span is lower, and that doesn't just affect like how I function as a person, but my relationship with the Lord, that I was like, okay, this is something like I need to take more seriously. So I definitely like, how do I notice it or how it changes is like, I'll be sitting in class and I'll be like, okay, I've already zoned out again. Like how long can I go without zone? You know, like like I'll sit there, I'll be like trying to challenge myself. Like, could I go an hour without zoning out? Like, because if I can go an hour without zoning out in class, I can go longer in my prayer time.
Oh, wow.
So I think about it a lot too in that sense. And like John Mark Comer talks about like your attention or devotion starts with attention. And I just want to always make sure I still have that like capacity to turn my attention towards God.
Wow. Man, that's a really good point. And so while you just focused on yourself and how it's kind of like an act of the will, you could say, of paying attention to things, how has it changed the way that things get your attention? How has it changed the way that things stimulate your brain, to use your language?
Yeah, so I think like I noticed that it takes for like quite a bit, like it used to take a lot to stimulate my brain, or like, you know, like it's like any like drug or dopamine or something like that. It like takes more it takes levels of increasing to continue to like pull you in. So I've noticed like that I have to be intentional with what, like I think of shows I watch. Like I love shows that are absolute mayhem, that just like throw anything in at like the most random point, or someone is randomly killed off just because it's like, it keeps me going, it keeps me entertained. So I notice it in like random stuff like that, or in conversations I've always tried, like I try now to be so intentional with not like trying to get something to say, because I think like we say we're really good at listening, but it's like we're really good at trying to be patient to then get our point out, versus like I want to actually just be good at listening, like kind of thing. So
Right.
yeah.
I see. So they kind of work together, don't they, in a
Kind of,
sense?
yeah.
That's really cool. And as these work together, what is slowing down? How does that affect your attention? How does slowing down affect your rest, like you talked about in your sermon?
Yeah, I mean, like, slowing down is probably one of the hardest things to do. And like I said, like if we are, I think of it as like a hamster wheel. Like if I'm running on a hamster wheel, like it just keeps going faster and faster and faster. And so it's like, that's kind of like how we handle stimulation. I feel like even in our day and age, it's like busyness is always viewed as a good thing. Like it's always like, oh, I'm busy is like almost like an achievement. Like it's like, hey, you get a gold sticker for being busy. Like that's what you're supposed to do with this life. So it's like slowing down, which then like stimulates my brain less, then like allows the opportunity for me to actually like experience the Lord. And instead of me like rushing through life, I'm like actually like learning very slowly, like slowly in both ways, like how to enjoy it. So yeah, it takes a lot of time, and I'm still really not good at it. Like, do I prefer to be busy? Yes, but like there are like moments where rest is so necessary and needed.
I see. So you did mention this busyness of life, like it's an accomplishment. We like to brag that we're busy.
Yeah.
And you're trying to pursue the contrary of slowness, or
wasn't from Christ, because it's like not an attractive thing. Like
Yeah.
no part of it is like, oh yeah, like yes. Like I mean, rest sounds nice, but I think too, like part of my slowness and like looking at it is like we don't even know how to rest well, and it takes like learning the patterns of slowness to even get to rest. So it's like, but like for the Christian walk in faith and slowness, it's like evident to me that Jesus lived that way. Like he was the Prince of Peace. He is the Prince of Peace. And if I want to actually embody that, I want to live like actually like him. So I think we have the disciplines in like prayer or meditation or like even fasting, which I'm trying to like implement more too in my life. But it's like very interesting to see of like, okay, how did he practically live? How can I take those things of like him not rushing to the next thing? Like, how can I make the people I interact with feel seen while I'm living? Like, I think of it too, like, I teased my roommates recently that like I'll be doing homework and I kept getting interrupted the other night, and I was like, I could feel myself getting frustrated of like, guys, I'm trying to finish this assignment. I'm a procrastinator, so I'm like, it's gonna be late. Like, let me finish this. And so it was like I just gotta finish this, and then I'll talk to you. I felt the Lord be like, if you start that habit now, that's how you're gonna live. Like, I'll talk to you when I get this done. I'll be with you when that happens. Like, so I'm just like trying to slow down and be like, you know what? I'm taking the late grade. Tell me what's going. Taking the slowness to actually care for the people around me. Like Jesus was so okay with being inconvened, and I feel that still now. So.
And so would you say that process of slowness and like even the grace of allowing the interruption of your roommates affect your own spiritual life? Would you say that this slowness has produced the fruit of the Spirit more effectively? And if so, like practically, what could that look like in my life, if so?
Yeah, I mean, I totally think it does. And again, John Mark Comer, what a guy. Thank you, John Mark Comer. I mean, you're great. But he like talks about in his book, like when describing love, the first thing that is like in 1 Corinthians 13, it's love is patient. And that has just stuck with me so much, because I sometimes am like, I'll be lamenting, or I'll be like, I'll feel the tension of like not getting all of God on this side of eternity, right? And I'll be like, oh, I wish I was there already. And I've taken him having to reveal himself in slow nature as a bad thing. And I think it's like there's a verse of like, we don't understand his slowness, right? And so it's like been me learning of like him being slow to reveal is many different factors. You know, one is the reality of sin, but the other thing is that he is not eager like we are to just be like, here I am, and then like move on, right? Like he is slow to reveal, because that leads to more intimacy, that leads to more like dwelling together, and not just like a quick, hey, this is me, and like gone. So I've learned like to love well, it really does take patience. Like I think it's like something that is like, again, not attractive in this world, or even like in my own self. Like it's not even like, I don't find it the easiest thing. But if love is the greatest of these things, like that's one way I can love someone better, is by taking the time and being patient, which are all simple things. But when you like practically are living them out, they actually feel, and like your heart change, and you feel different when you're doing it. It doesn't become a burden to sit down and listen to someone. Like it's like in the moment, it feels like the best thing that you can do, and the best way you can love God in that. So.
Wow. Oh, that's really, really cool. And so continuing on this thread that honestly you set up perfectly for me to ask this question of patient love.
Yeah.
What's a way that you've seen people show you that? And how can we show other people this idea of patient pursuing love?
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, it's Jesus for sure. It's like the consistency of God continually like showing me his love and not pressing that on me, but the invitation, right? So it's like, hey, I'm here, this is open, and I want to invite you into this, and I want to bless you lavishly because I love you. It's been like that, right? Because it's like someone can say I love you. If you don't hang out with them a lot, if you don't like see them a lot, like the love you doesn't mean much. It's like the history you have with that person impacts the I love you.
Yeah.
And so it's been like watching the Lord continuously pursue me. Once you like read scripture back and you're like, oh no, I've seen how this has happened in my own life, that just hits different, man. You're like, oh wait, like this, like he actually does that for me. But I feel like a more practical example would be my parents, and especially my mom. Like, she's so good to me. And yeah, just like my mom is so patient with me even when I like am upset or anything like that, which is a classic example. But yeah, it's humbling to like know that you have someone like that, like always for you, always rooting for you, always there to love you, and even on your worst days. So yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. Good example of your mom. That's really cool. And earlier in our conversation, you've talked about how attention is the beginning of devotion, right? So how do you utilize this principle to be devoted to God or devoted to other people in this slowness that we've been talking about? And what do you do to pay attention? What are some tangible things that I could do to pay attention?
Yeah, all of the things I talk about, I'm totally learning. Like, it's not a, hey, do this because I do this. It's a, do this because, like, I've seen when I try to do this, it helps even that much more. So it's like, I'm slowly learning. But for attention to turn into devotion to God, it's more like, if we never even look at him, like, how are we going to know who we're praying to? How are we going to know who we're worshiping? How do we know even him? Like, you don't, if you're talking to someone, I look at you. I don't look over here and like, you know what I mean? It's first the turning of the eyes. So it's like, that's kind of when I was working through the sermon, that's where I got the like reorder is like the first step is you have to set your priorities in the right way to be able to even first turn your attention. And I think like it's scriptural too of like, he says like to turn his eyes towards him. And I think of like Peter with Jesus of like once he has his attention on Jesus, it changes. The storm continues, but it changes his circumstance.
Yeah. So
practically though, so much harder. It's so much nicer to talk about it than like practically live it out. But I would say, Mark Wilson actually talks about it in his class of the tabernacle. And he talks about like how the priest could only go into the most holy of places once a year. And, you know, because of Jesus, we now get to like enter freely into communion with the Lord. But in that, he taught us like how to pray. So he would say like, you start outside and then you slowly work your way into the most holy place. Wow. And by doing that, like, it's not that the Lord makes it hard for you to get to him. It's we're so far away from him, it takes us like stripping ourselves every day of our flesh to then like even be able to hear him and see him. So I think that's changed like so much of like my concept of attention, because I've always been like, Lord, why is it so hard to like get to you? Like that doesn't like, if I want you, you say if you seek, I'll find, and like I don't get that. And it's been more like, oh no, like I have to like strip myself of my fleshly things and like slowly turn my attention towards him. So it looks more like when I'm praying or reading my Bible, that it like I take the time to just sit. Like I think or for me, I would say that I am really good at talking to the Lord. Like I could talk, not great at always listening. But it's like that I just sit and just be, even if it's like I'm not talking or listening. I try to practice even like if I'm driving somewhere, I try to not turn on music anymore or like stuff like that, which sounds so weird. Don't get me wrong, I'll still listen to music when I feel like it, but it's more of just like a habit of making sure I'm living in the moments, like, and inviting him into that kind of space. So. Oh
wow, those are some good examples. That's a really, really good point. And so then, going off of those examples, how do you suggest that we change our pace to be able to initiate those examples, to be more attentive to him? Does that just look like changing our schedules, planning it out ahead of time? What do you tend to do in those areas?
I suck at planning. I don't think I've like ever done that well in my entire life. So I don't have a good schedule. Like I don't write things I have down. I just try to keep it in my brain. That's not helpful. Yeah, I think it's dependent on the person. You know, like I don't know everyone's life. Like I can't sit here and be like, you should take 10 hours a day and go pray. You know, like that's just not practical. Like, and I wish it was. You know, I think that'd be kind of sick. But like it's dependent on like what way you're living in. And I think if you're walking with the Lord and you're actually intentionally seeking a space to become closer to him, he'll show you the ways in which you can like take away distractions to get closer to him. Like he's faithful to do so. Like you and I have talked about like that when I'm washing dishes or when you're washing dishes, like it is the best time to not existential crisis, although that sometimes happens, but to like take that time to like turn our focus to the Lord. Like I truly believe our God can meet us in any place. And so it's like, dude, if I'm doing dishes and can commune with the Lord, sign me up. Like that's it's weird though, because it does take a little bit of time and it takes like just that focus. And you've talked about Brother Lawrence. You've taught me about him, of like how he was peeling potatoes and meeting the Lord and that, you know, like it's not that we have to do these specific things because our God is like specific and wants it a certain way. It's just, again, how we live, how we've like created a world that can live so distracted from him. I mean, it's the perfect, like, honestly, attack of the enemy to make us so busy. We're not doing anything wrong necessarily, but if we're so distracted, we can't even commune with him. There's still something separating us from him. Like that's still a factor of us not being. So yeah, just different stuff like that. And it's so personal to everyone's own life. So.
Oh, wow. That's a good point. Thanks for telling us. So then to close, you talked about, near the end of your sermon about this, your understanding of shalom. Which is the Hebrew word for peace or wholeness, you could say, right?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to reordering your life, rest, and how you change the way you live to be able to live in a life of rest, how has the understanding of this peace changed the way that you live and changed the way that you look at different areas in your life?
Yeah, so I actually started looking into shalom about a year ago, and it was kind of like the concept of like I had a really hard season. And yet I felt like the peace of the Lord, and I was like, oh my word, like what in the world is going on? And my pastor, Natasha, was kind of just walking me through this, and I got to talk to her about like this concept of shalom. And yeah, so it's like shalom isn't just peace. That's kind of what we translate it to. But like you said, it's like wholeness, and it's like more accurately like restoration. Like it's like us being like the intended purpose of our creation. So if that is shalom, like we believe it would come from God, like that just in my mind makes sense. Like creator and creation as one would be the restoration. So that's kind of where I find like shalom to be at, is like my coming in with him. But I went through like last year where I was like, I could like pray and I'd go into shalom. Like I felt like I embodied peace and like was easily able to not be distracted and have these great prayer times. And then I like hit this season of life where I'm like, I feel like I have to fight tooth and nail to like get 5 minutes of non-distracted brain time with the Lord. So it's like the shalom, something again is like, I do not do well. It's like concepts that I'm like, Lord, this is cool. Teach me, like kind of thing. So again, I think it is just the first of like, I think of the garden a lot when I think of shalom, of the restoration component of it, of communion, not just with God, but with others. And Natasha was like the one who pointed that out to me, because I was like, shalom, me and God. And she was like, well, actually, if you're looking at the full restoration, it's not just you and God, it's you, God, and others. So that kind of came into with peace, of like when it talks to live at peace with everyone, that makes more sense in light of that, of, oh, I'm not just at peace with the Lord, I'm living at peace with everyone. And if we are like Christ wasn't just at peace with himself. He was at peace with other people, even if he didn't agree with them. So I think that's a huge component of it too, of like, I will know I'm actually in shalom when it's not just me and him, it's I'm affecting others, like I'm evidently walking in that peace kind of thing.
No,
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that made absolute sense. The wholeness, it's not just about us when it comes to rest, because it affects everyone, right? Because it changes how we treat people, right? That's a really good point. Well, thanks for your time, Taylor.
Thanks, Jay.
And thank you all so much for watching the Beyond Reach podcast. We'll see you next time.